Disclaimer: the following story is a work of fiction inspired by historical figures and urban legends. While Ginger Rogers was a real Hollywood actress and dancer, the events, characters, and supernatural occurrences described in this narrative are purely fictional and for entertainment purposes only. The story does not claim to depict real paranormal events associated with Ginger Rogers or her estate. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Reader discretion is advised due to suspenseful and supernatural themes. Ginger Rogers was more than just a Hollywood icon. She was the embodiment of golden-era elegance, a woman whose footsteps once lit up grand stages across America. From her legendary partnership with Fred Astaire to her Oscar-winning performances, Ginger's name became synonymous with grace, talent, and stardom. But while the spotlight followed her through decades of film and dance, few knew how she spent her later years far away from the bustling glamour of Los Angeles, tucked into a mist-shrouded ranch in southern Oregon. Locals knew it simply as the Rogers Place, a sweeping estate with white columned porches and a creaky ballroom that still echoed with forgotten melodies. After her passing in 1995, the property changed hands a few times, but no one ever stayed long. Rumors began to spread, strange lights flickering in the windows at night, ghostly music heard drifting from the empty ballroom, and the soft but unmistakable sound of tap dancing echoing down empty hallways. Lisa Monroe had always been fascinated by the paranormal. A researcher and podcaster known for exploring America's most haunted celebrity estates, Lisa considered herself a skeptic until she wasn't. After covering the famous Marilyn Monroe ghost sightings at the Roosevelt Hotel, she received an anonymous tip: if you want to find a real haunting, go to Ginger's ranch. Something's still there, waiting. The message was cryptic and signed, but enough to intrigue her. She booked a flight to Oregon the next day. Driving through the foggy mountain roads that led to the Rogers estate felt like slipping into a different time. Winding past pine forests and forgotten towns, Lisa's GPS lost signal 10 miles before she even reached the property line. The gravel driveway stretched endlessly under a canopy of looming trees. The house revealed itself slowly, like a memory returning after years of slumber, a grand two-story colonial with cracked paint and ivy choking the southern wing. Yet despite its decay, it exuded a strange charm. It wasn't just old, it was important. Historical. Alive in a way that unnerved her. The current caretaker, an elderly man named Frank, met her at the porch. He didn't say much, just handed her the keys, warned her that the upstairs rooms hadn't been used in years, and mentioned casually, if you hear dancing at night, just don't follow it. Lisa blinked. Excuse me? But Frank had already turned and hobbled down the steps toward his rusted pickup truck. He didn't look back. Lisa entered the house, wheeling her suitcase across the hardwood floors. Dust floated like ash through shafts of afternoon light. The furniture was antique, untouched, like someone had left in a hurry decades ago. The ballroom on the west end of the house immediately drew her in. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls above a wide, faded dance floor. A black grand piano sat in the corner, sheet music still resting on the stand. "They Don't Remember You," the title read. Lisa took out her voice recorder. Day 1, she began. Arrived at the Rogers estate. House appears structurally sound, but emotionally heavy. There's something here. That night, Lisa settled into the guest room on the second floor. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like fingers tapping impatiently. Around 2:37 a.m., she sat up in bed, heart racing. Somewhere downstairs, a record was playing. Faint and scratchy, but unmistakable. A slow, rhythmic melody, a classic jazz number she couldn't quite name. Then came the tapping. Sharp. Precise. Like someone performing a routine on the ballroom floor. Lisa tiptoed to the staircase and looked down into the dark. There was no one there. Yet the music continued. And so did the tapping. This was no ordinary house. And Lisa had a feeling that Ginger Rogers wasn't ready to leave the stage just yet. The next morning brought with it a thin veil of mist clinging to the windows and a silence that felt too deliberate. Lisa couldn't shake the events of the night before, how the tapping had continued for several minutes, each click of phantom heels matched with the haunting swing of old-time jazz. When she finally summoned the courage to check the ballroom, the record player was silent. The dust on the floor appeared untouched. But her recorder, which she had left on her nightstand, had captured the entire sound, music and footsteps included. Eager to uncover more, Lisa decided to spend the day talking to locals in the nearby town of Medford. The town itself was modest, dotted with diners, antique stores, and a surprisingly vocal community when it came to tales of Ginger Rogers. At a rustic cafe called Betty's Grill, Lisa struck up conversation with a waitress named Ruby, who had grown up hearing stories about the haunted dancer's house. Ruby leaned on the counter and lowered her voice. "I've never been up there myself, but my grandma used to swear that Ginger never left. She said she'd hear tap dancing out in the woods at night, echoing through the hills." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "In the woods?" Ruby nodded. "They say Ginger practiced even after she passed. My grandma thought she was rehearsing for someone who never showed up." Another local, an elderly man named Gary who used to deliver groceries to the estate, told Lisa that things started getting strange not long after Ginger's death. Lights flickering when no one was home. Doors locking themselves. People would move into caretake, and they'd leave within a week. One guy said he woke up with music playing in his head and couldn't stop hearing it until he left town. Lisa scribbled everything down. The pattern was becoming clear. The phenomena always centered around music, dancing, and movement. Returning to the estate that afternoon, Lisa stood in the middle of the vast, empty ballroom and tried to recreate the scene from the night before. She played the same record, one she'd found stacked under the old phonograph labeled Ginger's favorites, and walked slowly across the room. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. No cold breeze. Frustrated, she turned off the music and decided to explore the other wings of the mansion. In a narrow hallway just past the kitchen, she discovered a series of framed black and white photographs. Ginger in her prime, dressed in gowns and smiling beside famous actors. But one photo caught Lisa's attention, a candid shot of Ginger alone, seated at a table with a crystal pendulum in her hand. On the back, written in faint pencil, she asked for the door to stay open. The spirits listened. That night, Lisa set up her equipment, motion detectors, audio recorders, EMF readers, in the ballroom and nearby hallway. She also placed a handheld camcorder facing the large antique mirror that hung over the fireplace mantel. Around 2 a.m., just like the previous night, the air grew inexplicably colder. The temperature on her EMF reader dropped 5 degrees in under a minute. The motion sensor blinked, something had moved in front of it. Lisa grabbed her voice recorder and whispered, "Is there someone here with me? If you're Ginger, please give me a sign." Silence. Then came the faint rustle of a dress, followed by the unmistakable tap-tap-tap of high-heeled shoes moving across the ballroom floor. Lisa spun around, no one was visible. Her heart pounded as she slowly turned back to the mirror. That's when she saw it. In the reflection, standing just behind her, was the faint silhouette of a woman in a 1940s style gown. Blonde hair curled to perfection. Lips painted. Eyes fixed directly on Lisa's. Lisa gasped and turned around, but there was nothing there. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. Shaking, Lisa reviewed the footage on her camcorder. At the exact moment she saw the reflection, the screen flickered, and a soft whisper echoed on the audio. "I never stopped dancing." Lisa stared at the screen in disbelief. She had come looking for a haunting, and now it had found her. The mirror haunted Lisa more than the figure itself. That fleeting image of the ghostly woman, elegant, composed, and eerily calm, stayed in her mind even as the house remained silent the next morning. She replayed the footage again and again, hoping it was a trick of the light, a glitch in the camera, or even her imagination. But the whisper, that unmistakable voice saying, "I never stopped dancing," was real. Something intelligent, something aware, had reached out to her. Determined to learn more, Lisa began to comb through every room in the estate. The library yielded nothing more than vintage books and yellowing magazines. The second floor held mostly personal bedrooms, now dusty and faded with time. But it was the attic that would finally offer her a glimpse into Ginger Rogers' hidden life. The attic was cramped and musty, filled with trunks, hat boxes, and forgotten furniture draped in white cloth. Lisa uncovered a cedar chest with a tarnished lock, but easily pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were piles of old letters, personal journals, faded photographs, and what appeared to be a leather-bound scrapbook. Most of the letters were from fans, but a few were far more intimate, handwritten notes from a woman Lisa quickly recognized as Ginger's mother, Lela Rogers. Reading through the letters, Lisa discovered a different side of Ginger, one the public never saw. One note from Lela described their shared interest in spirituality and the afterlife. If the veil between worlds can be lifted, it will be through rhythm and memory, Lela had written. Another page held scribbled notes about seances, pendulum work, and resonant spaces where energy lingered. One name kept appearing, Evelyn. In one letter, Ginger wrote, "Evelyn says the room behind the shelf is active again. I'm hearing the piano at night. She thinks the door is opening too easily now." Lisa frowned. What room? What door? That same evening, back in the library, Lisa ran her fingers along the bookshelves, pressing on the spines, looking for a trigger. Eventually, one shelf clicked inward. With a creak, the bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. Heart pounding, she grabbed her flashlight and camera before stepping inside. The room below was small and circular, lit only by a tiny stained glass window high on the wall. In the center stood a table covered in velvet, surrounded by 5 chairs. Atop the table were candles, a spirit board, and a framed photo of Ginger and her mother smiling during what looked like a seance. The room smelled of dried herbs and old wax. Along one wall were notes scrawled on torn parchment, ritual instructions, Latin phrases, star charts. On the far end, Lisa noticed a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Unlike the one upstairs, this mirror had something odd about it. Her reflection seemed delayed, half a second off. When she moved, her image lagged slightly, like it was watching before reacting. Lisa shivered and stepped back. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from above. 1, 2, 3 sharp raps, like someone was knocking on the floor of the ballroom above. Lisa scrambled back upstairs, but when she reached the main floor, it was empty. The knocking stopped. Later, she cross-referenced the names she found in the attic, especially Evelyn. After hours of research and digging through archived news clippings, Lisa uncovered that Evelyn was Evelyn Walsh, an early 20th century spiritualist who conducted seances for Hollywood's elite. She had been close friends with both Ginger and Lela. Rumors hinted that Evelyn had used the Rogers estate as a spiritual retreat in the 1950s and even claimed to anchor spirits there to assist in performances from beyond the grave. Lisa sat back, overwhelmed. Ginger wasn't just haunted, she may have intentionally surrounded herself with spirits. If the seance room had remained active, if something had kept that spiritual door open. Suddenly, a melody began to drift from the hallway. The same record. The same tapping. But this time, it was accompanied by something new, a voice, faint and melodic, humming along to the music. Lisa walked toward the sound, recorder in hand. As she passed the mirror again, she noticed something chilling. Her reflection was no longer alone. Standing just behind her was Ginger Rogers, swaying slowly to the music, eyes filled with sorrow. The air had changed. Lisa could feel it in every room now, thicker, charged, as though the walls themselves were vibrating with secrets. After discovering the hidden seance chamber and witnessing Ginger's full apparition in the mirror, Lisa no longer questioned whether the house was haunted. The real concern now was why Ginger remained. Was she trapped, tormented, or perhaps still searching for something? That night, the paranormal activity escalated far beyond anything Lisa had previously experienced. It began with the scratching. Just after 1:30 a.m., while Lisa was reviewing her notes in the guest room, she heard a faint, rhythmic scratching behind the wall. It wasn't rodents or pipes, it was too deliberate. 3 short scratches. Then silence. Then again. When she pressed her ear against the wall, it stopped, only to resume a minute later, this time from the opposite side of the room. Lisa grabbed her EMF reader, which immediately spiked into the red as she approached the doorway. Then her handheld audio recorder, which had been sitting idle, clicked on by itself and began to record. A whisper followed. "Don't forget the rhythm." She never stopped. The voice was distorted, neither fully male nor female, but layered, as if multiple voices were trying to speak through one mouth. Panicked but composed, Lisa returned to the ballroom, where she had set up several motion-triggered cameras and an EVP device. As soon as she stepped into the room, every light fixture above her flickered violently. The grand chandelier swayed as though caught in an invisible breeze. And then the piano began to play. It wasn't mechanical, it was haunted. The keys moved slowly at first, then with greater confidence, tapping out the melody of a song Lisa had never heard before. She hit record. A second later, the footsteps returned. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, they circled her fast, then slow, like someone practicing a dance routine from another era. Lisa froze in the center of the room, too afraid to turn her back to the sound. "Ginger," she whispered. "Is this your house?" The footsteps paused. Then a woman's voice rang out from nowhere and everywhere at once, elegant. But he had died under mysterious circumstances during rehearsals in late 1948. Some said suicide, others whispered darker things. The cause of death had never been confirmed. What's more chilling, Thomas Vance had visited the Rogers estate the week before his death. Lisa now believed the house wasn't haunted by Ginger alone. There was something else here, something connected to the seance room, the mirrors, and this man's death. And whatever it was growing more aggressive. That night, her recording equipment picked up multiple EVP voices layered on top of each other. One screamed. Another wept. A third hissed, "She won't leave until it's finished." Objects began flying across rooms. A chair in the hallway moved by itself. Lisa awoke in the middle of the night with scratches on her shoulder, 3 lines, faint but unmistakable. She considered leaving. She even packed her bags. But before she could walk out, she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. A music box. Playing the same melody as the haunted piano, only this time it came from the attic. Drawn upward, Lisa climbed the stairs and followed the sound to a trunk she hadn't opened. Inside was a velvet-lined box, and within it, a letter. Sealed in wax. Addressed to the one who hears the steps. Lisa held the letter in her trembling hands. She hadn't expected this. The ghosts weren't just haunting, they were communicating. The question now was whether she was ready to listen. The sealed letter in Lisa's hands felt like a key, one that didn't just unlock a door, but something deeper, heavier, and far more dangerous. She hesitated before breaking the wax seal, her instincts battling her curiosity. But the moment she unfolded the yellowed paper, the air around her shifted. The house groaned, as if aware of what she was about to read. The letter, written in flowing, old-fashioned cursive, began with a salutation that sent chills down her spine. "To the one who hears the steps, if you are reading this, then the house has chosen you. You have heard what others could not. She is still here, not by accident, but by design." The letter was unsigned, but Lisa quickly recognized references to both Ginger and a mysterious, likely Thomas Vance. The letter went on to describe how spiritual experiments had been conducted on the property decades ago, led by a group of 5 people: Ginger Rogers, her mother Lela, Thomas Vance, Evelyn Walsh, the spiritualist, and an unnamed 5th participant. They believed that dance, rhythm, and memory could open a conduit between the living and the dead. They weren't trying to summon spirits, they were trying to anchor them. Lisa's heart pounded. They hadn't just opened a door, they had designed it to stay open. The more she read, the more disturbing the implications became. According to the letter, something went wrong during one of their final performances. Thomas had begun to lose control, claiming that he was hearing multiple voices, some of which did not belong to anyone they had summoned. One séance in particular had reportedly ended with Thomas collapsing, blood dripping from his ears, whispering over and over again, "She danced with someone else, someone I couldn't see." Lisa needed more evidence. She drove to the county archives in Medford and requested historical property records and obituaries related to the Rogers estate. After hours of digging, she unearthed a shocking revelation. Before Ginger purchased the property in the 1940s, it had belonged to a retired stage actor named Howard Bellamy, who had mysteriously vanished in 1928. No body was ever found, but neighbors at the time had reported strange lights and ritualistic music coming from the house. The estate had a hidden history long before Ginger's arrival. The deeper she dug, the more patterns emerged. Every 2 decades, reports of hauntings, disappearances, or psychological breakdowns were linked to the house. In the late 1960s, a young actress had been institutionalized after spending a single week there. In the 1980s, a caretaker vanished without a trace. Ginger herself had become increasingly reclusive in her final years, often speaking to people who weren't there and refusing to sleep in the West Wing, where the seance room had been built. Lisa returned to the house with dread growing in her chest. She was no longer documenting a haunting, she was documenting a spiritual experiment that had failed catastrophically. Back in the seance room, Lisa examined the symbols drawn along the walls more carefully. One recurring sigil, resembling an infinity loop wrapped around an eye, caught her attention. She took photos and later cross-referenced it with known occult symbols. It matched a lesser-known alchemical glyph used in old European rituals called the Eye of Continuance, believed to trap souls in a repeated cycle unless the rite was properly closed. That explained everything. Ginger's soul wasn't just lingering because of unfinished business. She had been caught in a loop, an echo of a ritual that had never ended. And she wasn't alone. Thomas Vance, and possibly others, were also trapped. The whispering voices. The disembodied reflections. The layered EVPs. It wasn't just Ginger calling out. It was a chorus of the lost. Lisa realized the mirror wasn't a simple supernatural object. It was likely the anchor, the one item binding these souls to this world. Perhaps Ginger had been trying to reach her mother, or Thomas, or even her younger self. Whatever the reason, the house had become a spiritual prison. As Lisa stared into the mirror once more that night, her own reflection blinked once, then remained perfectly still while Lisa stepped backward. She gasped. Her reflection stayed still. Then, slowly, it began to smile. Not Lisa's smile. Someone else's. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. That smile in the mirror, cold, rehearsed, and entirely not her own, wasn't just a glitch or a moment of pareidolia. It was deliberate. The reflection had become something else. Someone else. And for the first time, she felt that she was no longer an observer in this haunting. She had become a participant. Snapping out of the trance, she stumbled back from the mirror, heart hammering in her chest. The lights above her buzzed and flickered, casting strobe-like shadows across the ballroom. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, came the now familiar sound, the slow tapping of dance shoes. But this time, it wasn't graceful. It was erratic. Angry. Like someone forcing their way through a routine that was unraveling. Lisa grabbed her recorder and whispered into it, "Something is trying to get through." I don't think it's Ginger anymore, if it ever was. At that moment, the ballroom door creaked open on its own. She walked in, cautiously, drawn toward the piano, which sat ominously in the corner, untouched yet full of presence. The room was cold, so cold her breath hung in the air. She turned on the spirit box, letting it scan rapidly through radio frequencies, waiting for something, anything. It didn't take long. First came static. Then came a woman's voice, layered in reverb, whispering, "You shouldn't have come back." Lisa's hands trembled. "Ginger? Is that you? Are you trapped here?" No answer. Then another voice came through. Deeper. Male. Far more menacing. "She brought us here. She won't let go." Lisa's heart sank. The voices were contradicting what she had assumed all along, that Ginger was the victim. But what if she wasn't? What if she had been the one to start it all? The seances. The anchors. The endless rehearsals, driven by obsession rather than grief? Determined to get answers, Lisa returned to the seance room beneath the library. She brought candles, a spirit board, and the compact mirror she had found in the attic, belonging, she believed, to Ginger's mother, Lela. Placing the mirror in the center of the table, she lit the candles and spoke clearly. Ginger Rogers. Thomas Vance. Evelyn Walsh. If you're here, I ask you to come forward. Silence. Then a soft gust of air blew out 2 candles. The flame of the third danced violently before stretching upward, elongating unnaturally before extinguishing itself. Suddenly, the mirror began to fog over from the inside. Lisa leaned closer. Slowly, letters began to form in the condensation, written by an unseen finger. Set her free. Lisa blinked. Set who free? She asked. The room shook. Bookshelves rattled above. A shriek erupted from the hallway, the unmistakable cry of a woman, high-pitched and filled with torment. Then came a pounding sound from the walls, thump, 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 as though someone were trapped inside them, trying to break through. Lisa grabbed her equipment and rushed back into the ballroom. That's when she saw her. Ginger Rogers stood at the center of the dance floor, wearing a flowing 1940s gown. Her head was tilted, eyes hollow, mouth twitching slightly as though remembering lyrics from a song that no longer existed. She began to dance, slow, mechanical movements, her feet dragging unnaturally, like she was being pulled by invisible strings. Lisa raised her recorder and tried to speak, but Ginger stopped mid-dance and snapped her head toward her. Her voice echoed across the room. They never let me finish. They forgot me. But I stayed. Behind Ginger, more figures began to materialize, transparent silhouettes of men and women in formal wear, all dancing silently, as if trapped in a never-ending ballroom performance. Lisa watched in horror as Thomas Vance appeared among them, his eyes dark and blank, mimicking Ginger's steps. Their movements weren't joyous. They were repetitive, strained, desperate. Suddenly, one of the dancers broke from formation and rushed toward Lisa. She braced herself, but instead of harm, the figure screamed directly into her mind, "Break the mirror." End the curtain. Lisa understood. The mirror wasn't just a viewing portal, it was the anchor. The performance had to end. The curtain had to close. Rushing back to the seance room, Lisa grabbed the compact mirror and the larger ballroom mirror from above the mantel. She piled them both into the fireplace and doused them in alcohol. The house roared around her, groaning like it was in pain. As she struck a match and dropped it in, the mirrors burst into flame, and so did the room's energy. Screams echoed from every corner of the house. The chandelier above shattered, raining glass like confetti from a final performance. In the fire, for just a moment, Lisa saw Ginger's face, young, vibrant, and smiling. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." Then she was gone. The tapping stopped. The music ceased. The house finally fell silent. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time since arriving at the Rogers estate, Lisa could no longer hear the low hum of unseen energy or the distant echo of music that seemed to rise from the walls themselves. The house, once thick with tension, now felt hollow. Still, as if the performance had finally concluded and the stage lights had gone dark. Smoke curled lazily from the fireplace in the seance room, where the 2 mirrors, both the small compact and the massive ballroom centerpiece, had cracked, melted, and blackened under the flames. Lisa stood in the middle of the room, trembling, unsure if what she had done had truly worked or merely changed the rules of the haunting. But in her chest, she felt something she hadn't in days: relief. The spirits were gone. Or at least no longer bound. She spent the next few hours combing through the house, cautiously moving from room to room, calling out softly to the air. "Ginger. Thomas. Anyone still here?" There was no reply. Her EMF readers remained still. No unexplained cold spots. No tapping. No flickering lights. And yet, the ballroom remained the most haunting of all, not because of what she felt there, but because of what she no longer did. The piano, once possessed with unnatural energy, now sat dormant. The dance floor, where ghostly footsteps had repeated the same tragic choreography for decades, was scuffed and dust-covered. A place that once felt crowded with invisible performers now felt like a hollow stage, emptied after the final bow. Lisa spent the next day documenting everything. Video footage, audio recordings, photographs. The history she had uncovered wasn't just fascinating, it was dangerous. The seance room, the sigils, the endless cycles of spiritual entrapment. It wasn't just a haunting, it was a looping ritual gone wrong. A performance that kept repeating because no one had ever ended the show. By destroying the mirrors, both the symbolic and literal anchors of the house, Lisa had broken the cycle. The ghosts had been clinging to a moment that never reached closure. Ginger's need to be remembered. Thomas's obsession with her. Evelyn's failed attempts to balance spiritual forces. Lella's blind encouragement of it all. The ritual had held them in a purgatory built on applause that never came. Now, it was done. But there was one final task. Lisa wrote a letter. Not to any ghost, but to the town of Medford. She contacted the local historical society and delivered her findings, part as a warning, part as a tribute. She included copies of the seance notes, the original letter addressed to the one who hears the steps, and even a full report on the previous owners who had mysteriously disappeared. She didn't mention the mirrors or her own direct encounter with the spirits. Those were hers to keep. Some truths, she believed, weren't meant for everyone. Frank, the caretaker, returned to the house a few days later, and Lisa handed him the keys. "You're leaving?" he asked, his weathered eyes studying her face. "It's done," she replied. "She's not dancing anymore." Frank gave a solemn nod, as if he somehow knew all along what was happening inside those walls. A week later, Lisa released a special 2-part podcast episode titled, "The Final Bow, The Haunting of Ginger Rogers." It became her most listened to work. Listeners around the world emailed her, fascinated by the mystery and moved by the strange beauty of the story. Many said the tale felt more like a tragedy than a ghost story, a story about unfinished art, longing, and the desperate desire to be seen. And then, one night, back in her small apartment in Portland, Lisa awoke at exactly 2:37 a.m. The same time she'd first heard the tapping at the estate. She sat up in bed, heart thudding. The room was quiet, but her phone had a new voicemail, a number not listed in her contacts. She hesitated, then pressed play. Soft music played, crackling, old, familiar. A woman's voice, barely audible, whispered, "Don't forget me." Lisa froze. She checked the number. It was disconnected. The message had no timestamp. Perhaps the curtain had closed, but some performances, she realized, always find an encore. Months had passed since Lisa left the Rogers estate, but the experience clung to her like the scent of old perfume, subtle, but impossible to forget. The house no longer appeared in public listings. When she tried to track its status, she learned it had been quietly sold to a private buyer who refused to allow media or paranormal investigators onto the property. That alone told her everything she needed to know. Someone wanted it forgotten. Or hidden. Her podcast had exploded in popularity after the Rogers series. Paranormal forums dissected every episode, creating theories about who the fifth seance member was, what the Eye of Continuance truly meant, and whether Ginger had orchestrated the haunting or been a victim of it. But Lisa never responded to the speculation. She felt a strange loyalty to the truth she had uncovered, even if the world wasn't ready to hear it all. Despite everything she'd experienced, Lisa still considered herself grounded. Yet there were moments, quiet, creeping ones, where she felt something had followed her back. Her mirrors, for instance, occasionally caught motion when there was none. Once, while brushing her teeth, she swore she saw the faint shape of a woman in the hallway behind her. She turned, no one there. But the air had shifted. Familiar. Cold. Like the ballroom. She began to dream about the house again. In her dreams, she stood on the ballroom floor alone, yet surrounded by applause. Above her, the chandeliers flickered, and Ginger stood across from her, eyes dark, mouth moving, but with no sound. Lisa would wake up before she could read the ghost's lips. Every single time. Then came the invitation. An embossed envelope arrived in her mailbox with no return address. Inside was a card that read simply, The curtain is up. The encore awaits. Saturday, 8 p.m. For 71 Bellamy Road. Formal attire. Lisa's heart stopped. Bellamy, that was the surname of the stage actor who had originally owned the estate before Ginger. A name forever tied to the property's dark legacy. But 471 Bellamy Road wasn't in Oregon. It was in Los Angeles. She debated going. She debated it for days. But the card burned a hole in her thoughts. She knew, just knew, it was connected. And that someone, or something, wanted her to come. She declined. That Saturday night, at exactly 8 p.m., her apartment lights dimmed for several seconds. Her record player, which hadn't worked in months, began to spin on its own. It played a slow, warbling jazz tune she hadn't heard since her last night at the estate. She didn't panic. She listened. And then, just as the final notes faded, her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Same unknown number. This time, it was Ginger's voice. Calm. Beautiful. Echoing. I remember you. Lisa didn't sleep that night. Despite all the closure she thought she'd earned, burning the mirrors, ending the performance, setting the spirits free, she couldn't escape the feeling that something deeper had been awakened. Maybe by confronting the cycle, she had become part of it. Not possessed. Not haunted. Just chosen. Marked. And as the years passed, Lisa noticed a pattern forming. She wasn't the only one. A fellow investigator in Chicago reported seeing a woman in a 1940s dress reflected in an unused mirror. A historian in New York claimed a piano in an old theater played itself during a power outage. A theater director in San Francisco said an invisible partner danced with him across the stage during a rehearsal, matching his every move in complete silence. All of them had listened to her podcast. All of them had one thing in common. They'd heard the steps. Perhaps breaking the mirrors hadn't destroyed the curse. Perhaps it had only scattered it, set it loose. Now, Ginger Rogers wasn't bound to one stage. She was everywhere the spotlight touched. And sometimes, late at night, when the air goes cold and music plays from nowhere, people still swear they see her. Twirling. Smiling. Waiting for her next partner to join her in one last dance. The final bow, it seems, was never really the end. 91.